She told the doctor her daughter was faking it, standing right there while her daughter was in the hospital bed. The child learned something that day that would take decades to unlearn, that her pain only existed if her mother allowed it to. Researchers call this medical neglect through denial. Survivors call it the moment they stopped trusting their own body. So, what happens to a person who grows up never being believed? She told the doctor her daughter was faking it, standing right there while her daughter was in the hospital bed. The child learned something that day that would take decades to unlearn, that her pain only existed if her mother allowed it to. Researchers call this medical neglect through denial. Survivors call it the moment they stopped trusting their own body. So, what happens to a person who grows up never being believed? I've been sitting with this for a while, trying to figure out how to say it correctly. Because the people this happened to, they already know. They don't need me to explain it. What they might need is to hear someone say it out loud, plainly, without dressing it up. So I'm going to. There's a particular kind of household that looks completely normal from the outside, functional, sometimes even warm. The kind where the mother volunteers at school events and knows all the neighbors by name. The father coaches Little League. The family has photos on the wall, coordinated, smiling. And somewhere inside that house, a child is sick, not dramatically, not in a way that announces itself. Maybe it's a chronic stomachache that never fully goes away. Maybe it's a sadness that sits behind the eyes. Maybe it's something physical, something that would show up on a scan, if anyone ever ordered one. But no one orders one, because the parent, usually the narcissistic one, has already decided what the child is. And what the child is fine, or difficult, or attention-seeking, or dramatic. The parent has a story about this family, and illness doesn't fit that story. A sick child is an inconvenience. A sick child is a reflection. And a narcissistic parent cannot afford a reflection that makes them look bad. So the child is told they're fine, repeatedly, quietly, sometimes gently, which is almost worse. You're okay. You just want attention. Other kids have real problems. Researchers studying emotionally neglectful families have documented something called reality distortion within the family unit, where the parent's interpretation of events becomes the only permitted interpretation. Dr. Carol McBride, in her work on narcissistic mothers, describes children in these households as learning to outsource their own perceptions, to check with the parent before trusting what their body is telling them. Think about what that means for a moment. A child who feels pain learns to ask, "Is this real?" A child who is frightened learns to look at their mother's face before deciding whether to cry. A child who is genuinely unwell learns to apologize for mentioning it. The body sends signals. The parent overrides them. And eventually, Not all at once, but slowly, the child stops receiving the signals at all. This is the part that took me a long time to understand. It's not just that these children are disbelieved. It's that they learn to disbelieve themselves. The mechanism internalizes. The parent doesn't need to be in the room anymore. The child carries the dismissal inside them like a second voice. It's probably nothing. I'm probably fine. I shouldn't make a fuss. Adults who grew up this way often describe going years, sometimes decades, without seeking medical attention for serious symptoms. Not because they couldn't access health care, because they genuinely did not trust that what they were experiencing was real enough to deserve it. That's not a quirk. That's an injury. Here's the darkest part. Some of these children were genuinely, seriously ill, and the illness progressed because no one looked. And when they finally got a diagnosis, as adults, sometimes much later than they should have, the first thing many of them felt wasn't relief. It was grief. Grief for the child who was sick and was told she was lying. Grief for the years she spent apologizing for a body that was doing everything it could just to survive. Some of them describe standing in a doctor's office, a real diagnosis on paper in front of them, and still hearing their mother's voice. Are you sure? You always did exaggerate. The parent isn't there, hasn't been there in years. But the voice is. It's always been there, quiet, underneath everything. That's what this does. It doesn't just deny the illness in the moment. It plants a doubt so deep that the child carries it into every room she enters for the rest of her life. It makes her a stranger to her own body. There's something that feels important to say here, not as a conclusion, just as an observation. Most people who do this to their children don't think of themselves as cruel. They think of themselves as realistic, practical, unsentimental in a world that's too soft. They believe they're doing the child a favor by not indulging them. And that belief, that sincere, unshakable belief, is what makes it so hard to name. Because it doesn't look like cruelty. It looks like a mother who doesn't worry easily. If something in this sat with you, if you recognized a voice, or a room, or a feeling, I want you to know there are people trained specifically to help untangle this. You don't have to explain the whole history to deserve support. And I want to leave you with just one question. If no one ever believed you when you were sick, do you believe yourself now?